Welcome back to BlackHat 2025. Yeah, I'm still here. I've been here. I was even here when there were other people doing things, but I was here and I was just standing over there so you couldn't see me. But we're recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio at Mandalay Bay, not telling you where, in Las Vegas. There's a madhouse downstairs. It's totally crazy. I tried to get to the floor to get a t-shirt from ThreatLocker, but I couldn't get there. But anyway, I'm Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Jason Passwaters, the CEO at Intel 471. Hi, Jason.
Hey.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. It's good to be here.
I think Intel's one of those things that I know about it conceptually, but I've never really worked in that space. I mean, directly. I mean, I've done stuff where people ask me to do that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about teams and how this fits into your enterprise. Mm-hmm. Because when I first started in this, the cybersecurity team, for everything from Intel to changing the toner cartridges was me. Network security, I'm there. Programming evaluation, gotcha. Because that was just really what it was. It was not a priority. It was something where they're like, well, yeah, if you have any spare time, feel free to, to review. So how do you think that the role of cybersecurity teams is evolving now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been happening over the last 20 years where previously you could build a wall, the idea was you could build a wall around your organization and protect it like that and just block everything. The realization is you can't do that in the global business environment and be successful. You've got to have these virtual and literal entryways in and out of your business. And that obviously impacts cybersecurity. So the way it's evolved is the realization that I have to understand the external space, the space beyond the wire as well, and be intimately familiar with that as much as the internal space. So you've seen that kind of evolution happen, I would say, over the last 20 years. You'd be hard pressed if you went 15, 20 years ago to find a CISO that would probably say, yeah, I'll be negotiating with ransomware actors at some point in the next 15 years. But here we are in 2025.
20 years ago, you probably couldn't find a CISO. That's a modern concept for a lot of organizations that were just still adding those roles because they realized what you're talking about. They needed somebody, one, to guide that, and two, that a lot of times the C-suite people had no idea what any of this stuff meant, and it gets esoteric. I remember getting a call from a C-suite member asking me, "What is ransomware?" And it was a pretty big company. And I'm like, well, it's how they come in and encrypt all your hard drives. They go, okay, just start defining each word as you speak. Yep. Because they didn't have any, and they didn't have anybody. It was a mid-sized company, but they didn't have a CISO, and they just they call networking, and they're like, I don't know, it's some stupid nonsense. Don't worry about it. We got the network up.
Look at my background. I was counterintelligence, human intelligence in the Marines. I used to track bad guys, interrogator. I've actually turned that skill set, and we've built a whole business around that. Now there's an industry around that, tracking that external aspect of the threat and delivering that knowledge to the
I think that's really useful. Do you think some of this need, that's always cool. That was cool in 1960. Intel's been something that people have been collecting since, I don't know, the Sumerian Empire was probably going, what's going on, over those hills. So it's always been important to know what people are up to. And seeing, and there's always been intel for corporate. Not security intel, but what's our competitors doing? Yep. What's happening in the marketplace? But as I started seeing this being driven, it was about the spread of the internet. And you think it's about the massive availability of information and the speed with which that information arrives?
Yeah, it's this stuff is so prevalent, and the need to kind of cover down on it. The bad guys are much faster than us. They can find things much quicker than us. Oftentimes they're more innovative than us. When I say us, I mean the enterprise, the companies.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's just, that's why it's so pervasive.
You and I were talking before we started recording about old time stuff and when Carolyn Meinl published the Happy Hacker's Guide to Mostly Harmless Hacking, and there was this big outcry because she revealed things like what our login is and, finger as a service, and it was supposed to be some grand revelation because that information wasn't widely available. So people that were systems level people knew these kind of things, but they didn't talk about it a lot. Yeah. So, but today, a 10-year-old kid with a vendetta can gather massive amounts of intel about an enterprise, about a global enterprise. Even you could be gathering intel just by yourself.
Yeah, the barrier of entry, for the attacker has been lowered a lot through technology and just through the availability of information that's freely out there.
And do you think like the malware as a service people are driving that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the actual, that cyber criminal ecosystem, they've got business models that some CEOs would, take the morality and the ethical aspect away for a second. You'd be pretty impressed by, the margins and the growth that they have. And it's all through, a malware as a service, right? Like they've created businesses around this. And that's really like 2010 was, I think, the kind of point where you really started to see this professionalization of cybercrime take shape from a business perspective.
It looks very professional. I looked at some of that for a client who asked me, like, could you just brief us on this? Tell us something about what this dark web thing and all this stuff is. And I was getting like eye-opening things, but I saw less moral and ethical stuff with some of these people than I expected. It was more like organized crime, where it's like, the mafia neighborhood is the safest neighborhood in town because people that break the rules, somebody comes and puts you in the trunk of a Cadillac. But I wasn't seeing them saying things like that. But they were talking about their business model and their plan and their customer service and support. And I called one. They had they had like a WhatsApp number. And I called it, and I was asking, like, well, we're thinking about getting involved with you, and I'm just treating it like a client, and the guy and the customer service was awesome.
Yeah.
They were helpful. I didn't get a robot. I was thinking about this when I was on talking to an airline recently, and I was like, you guys should go model your customer service after these bad guys because theirs worked really well, and they got me straight away to the person I needed to talk to without a bunch of nonsense.
I mean, they're in the business of making money, right? For the most part, cyber espionage aside, they're in the business of making money, and and that's what we do. We track that model, and then help our customers understand how it works.
Okay. So I guess one of the questions I had for you then was like, what do we? I'm going to add to it, but what do we need to be doing about this? In terms of an enterprise now, because I was thinking, if somebody opens a port on a firewall in Singapore, and an agentic AI notices it and passes that information to another agentic AI that then passes that intel on to a bad person or a group, and they immediately start exploiting port 666. A lot of companies are going to be very intimidated by the idea that this almost butterfly wing kind of stuff is critical to their business, because that could literally be a massive exploit that results in the entire company being ransomware. It could be something where the whole place is shut down. So what do we need to be doing?
Yeah, whenever you have new technologies and new things like agentic AI, people are trying to figure out how do we leverage this. And it's a necessity because you're seeing budgets and headcount suppressed and reduced, but the need to, do security and reduce risk, it's still going to be there. It's still there. So it's about understanding that, before you deploy it, of course, but getting that external kind of visibility into what the bad guys are doing on a regular, ongoing basis, kind of maintaining that finger on the pulse. Like, to me, that is just the requirement, in addition to understanding the internal situation, where the agentic AI, I think, in a positive way can come into play, or just, I call it operationalization, right? So, if budgets are being suppressed, if headcounts are being reduced, but you still need to do your job, how do you do that in an efficient way? Okay, so operationalization is basically taking a piece of intel or data, conducting a course of action to satisfy a security or risk use case, right? Simply, a human can do it, or you can do it through AI or technology. Where people need to really go is say, hey, we need to integrate across the enterprise, all the different departments and systems that we're using to satisfy these use cases. I'm now delivering intel to my VP of HR, the North Korean IT workers situation, very pervasive. And she is then tweaking the hiring process, the technology they use, or educating the hiring managers so that we can detect that and make sure that we don't fall victim to that. Well, that needs to happen technically through an integration with the HR systems. Third-party vendor supplier risk mitigation. There needs to be intel integrations into your management systems that will then deliver that intel directly and then identify the threats when you have exposure. You can apply this to any use case. I mean, patch prioritization, same thing. It's about taking discrete intel, streaming it through integrations or through agentic AI to identify the issues before they become problems.
Yeah, because you could. I mean, I've seen stuff like this done in completely different realms with like pricing structures and things like that, where they were collecting intel and feeding it back to, I don't know, a sales manager, so that they had kind of a live action feed when they're trying to do sales or they're trying to talk to customers or whatever, and they got a lot of things dancing around there. But I've thought about how powerful that would be if I could pull up something that, if I had a dashboard that was telling me here's a bunch of chatter, but it's not just chatter, because yesterday I was talking to somebody and I was telling them my first job I had a stack of green bar this high that was the logs from the night before, and I was supposed to sign them saying I had reviewed them, and I was like, yeah, this is never going to happen. And I mean, if I can gel that chatter down to what matters to me and what is in my risk profile. I mean, there's obviously going to be things out there that I just say, I choose to accept this risk.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm saying sometimes you have to do that.
That's a course of action.
No, it is. And sometimes it's a valid course of action.
100%.
I mean, I've seen people say this is just not a real valid threat. But sometimes they do that to, as a kind of cop-out too. So, I mean, is that where you're going with this? Is we get to a point where you're looking at some issue with like your firewall, and now all this intel comes up about here's 3 places where that was compromised and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we just rebuilt our entire platform. So we built our business around supporting what I would consider the core of the intel market, where, the most mature teams, they know how to take the data, the information, extract the TTPs, behaviors, and whatnot.
Yeah.
But as the industry grew, you saw $30 billion companies immature in their intel journey. They want to do intel, but they don't have the resources yet. They can't command the budget, so they need to start somewhere. So when we released our platform, we really got it down to 3 modes. Exposure mode is kind of a tactical orientation of when the bad guys look at me, what do they see? What opportunities exist? Because I need to plug them now.
You bet.
And that's very use case driven. So, third-party vendor supplier risk is a module. Attack surface exposure is a module. We're going to add new modules around vulnerability patch prioritization. And then you have the intel mode, which is I need to track the threat actors directly. I need to know what they're saying, what they're talking about, so I can understand intent and behaviors.
Yeah.
And then you have hunt mode. Hunt mode is really the operationalization out of the box, right? So we take all the intel, we curate it and create hunt packages, or you can use the platform to manage your own hunt packages. And then the integrations with EDR, SOAR, SIEMs, you can then deploy those hunts like downrange. So you abstract or take away the need to deal with all the intel directly and manually, and you're constantly just deploying these hunt packages to understand how where your gaps are.
Does that kind of thing vertically integrate across like this sort of supply chain stack? I mean, you're mentioning third-party suppliers and things. So if I'm up here, I'm this big, multinational organization, but I've got thousands of vendors that are feeding me, can that kind of trickle down through that stack?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the long-term vision. When I talk about the need, so one of the needs that you're going to see, the pressures I think from the business is, I talk about supporting my VP of HR with that intel. You're going to see that within organizations where other functions throughout the business require intel support, and it's not scalable or efficient to do that manually.
No.
So you're going to have to plug into those third-party systems that they're using, the technologies they use to manage the hiring process. The vendor supplier management team, what systems do they use? Is it Ariba?
Yeah.
Is it,
if it was a
whatever.
CISO, that's definitely one of the things, like I used to do consulting. It was a very, very long time ago, but it was much more along these lines, which was you've got these military bases, but they hire local vendors in, like Kaiserslautern or somewhere, and they bring, I don't know, sausages onto the airbase.
Yep.
Well, those vendors never were perceived as a threat. They're just a bunch of local guys with trucks, and they bring sausage on the airbase. Okay, that's fine. But today and later, after 9/11, there was a lot of movement towards we need to vet these guys. We need to know who they are. And a lot of those companies just kind of folded up because it wasn't because they were doing anything bad. It was just like, if the CISO, I would really like to be seeing that threat surface, you know, with all those vendors and going, oh, there's a problem over here with that guy.
Oh, yeah.
And that company was compromised last week and they're tied into our entire data structure and things like that.
Yeah, and oftentimes that, you know, there'll be kind of an unwitting, threat to your organization.
Absolutely.
So they could be compromised, and the external visibility that we provide will identify that. But that organization might not be so proactive in telling their customers that, hey, we've got a major issue over here. But you basically we know about that. So that's where I think that Intel supports that third-party vendor supplier risk mitigation.
And I think that's one of the biggest threat vectors there is. I mean, right now, because I mean, even if I'm a superhuman company and I've really locked everything down, I still have to let people in and out the door, and I don't want to, but I have to because I can't. It's not 1975, and I can't roll all my own software and everything here. So I've got people plugging in. Many people, plugging in. I mean, it's almost like it drills down to like individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, just you look at your house and you go, is my oven spying on me? I mean, guess what? It's wanting to connect to the internet every day. And I mean, I literally see it because, I mean, I actually track what traffic's on my home network. And I'm like, why does that thing it's trying to ping something in China. I'm like, no, you can't. I don't care what you want to do. I'm not letting you do that. But I think we're getting there. I mean, like even to small vendors.
Yeah, even the small vendors. And then those small vendors are playing a critical role in the business of some very large corporations. I mean, I can go back to the end of 2017. I can tell you there's a very specific Eastern European actor that we were engaged with, and he was selling access to SolarWinds. And you know what happened?
I
2020,
that story,
that came out. And he was a very sophisticated threat actor. I mean, he was doing a lot of interesting and sophisticated stuff. Well, that's a third-party issue for a lot of people.
A lot.
So
it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this is a very important area to be in, so I'm glad you're there.
I appreciate it.
It was great to get to talk to you. But thanks, Jason, for joining us today. If you want to find out more about Intel 471, please visit securityweekly.com/Intel471BH. For all our other BlackHat 2025 coverage by CyberRisk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/BlackHat. Thanks again, Jason, and stick around because we have more content coming to you right away. So fast, the chair won't even have a chance to cool off here at BlackHat 2025.